This presentation is supported by our regional water supplier, Tarrant Regional Water District. TRWD maintains 4 area lakes and pipelines needed to provide surface water to local water treatment plants so they can clean it to meet drinking water standards for our communities. They also work with many cities in Tarrant County, such as Fort Worth, Arlington, and Mansfield, to provide water conservation programs for the community. Conservation is an important water supply strategy to help meet the needs of a growing population. There are currently 2.3 million people in Tarrant County, and this is expected to double over the next 50 years. This is why TRWD supports many programs that help save water through outdoor watering and gardening education. At SaveTarrantWater.com, you can sign up for free weekly watering advice custom to your location. If you are a resident of Tarrant County, you can sign up for a free sprinkler system checkup where a licensed irrigator comes to your home and provides a comprehensive evaluation of your system with recommendations to reduce water waste. There is also an event calendar where you can find important information about future classes and workshops. TRWD also partners with organizations like Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service and the Tarrant County Master Gardeners to provide educational programs just like this one. Be sure to check out SaveTarrantWater.com and sign up for their free services.
Excellent. Hi, I'm Sian Rees, and I've been a Tarrant County Master Gardener since 2017. And tonight I'm presenting the topic of keyhole gardens to everyone. And I'm really glad you're all here because I love talking about keyhole gardens. I love sharing the joy that I had when I got to make them. And I'll give you a little background on how this all came to be. I was an intern at Durham Intermediate in Southlake, and I was helping out there, and I was taking classes, and I had took a class on keyhole gardens, and the topic really interested me. And at the very same time, the Young Men's Service League in Southlake approached our garden and said, "We'd love to give you a gift." It was the ultimate service project that they gave to a 501c3 once a year. They just selected different recipients and they said, "What would you like to do in your garden that we can help you with?" And the Young Men's Service League is about 120 young men and their moms, and they're very hard workers, and they had some funds. And so I said, well, hey, let's build some keyhole gardens. And so it was a project that I was very passionate about. It happened in 2018. And I just love building things. I've always been like that. I've always built things. I built things with my dad when I was a little girl. And I'm a very hands-on kind of person. So today, what I'm hoping you'll get out of my presentation is the understanding of what a keyhole garden is, how to build one, why they're significant, and hopefully you will get to share some of the same passion that I have now about this particular garden. So I'm just going to move on here to give you the basics of a keyhole garden. Now, I can't see a show of hands here, but quite often when I talk to people and I mention keyhole gardens, they don't really know what a keyhole garden is. And it's essentially a small raised garden bed. I'm sure a lot of you here are familiar with raised bed gardening and the benefits of having your soil in a contained area and it's raised and it's a controlled environment. That's essentially what a keyhole garden is. But there's an extra bonus in a keyhole garden because it has a compost center in the middle. And so it's a very easy access compost that at our keyhole gardens at Durham, it's very easy for everybody to put in compost items, very easy to get in there. And I'll show you some pictures very shortly of the concept. But it's a very environmentally friendly way of gardening simply because you're taking things from the environment, the leftover scraps, and you're making your own soil as well too. And the keyhole garden concept really doesn't cost very much at all too. So it's very affordable, ergonomic design. And as I'm going to discuss, there's a lot of readily available materials. So here's your visual. I'm a visual person. So I saw one of these in a presentation. And I was like, oh, that looks really easy to make. I like to use these retaining blocks because it's like Lego for your garden. And so whenever I find a pile of them, which I did when I first started working at Durham, I started edging things and I started, just organizing them and making things look beautiful. And little did I know that that was my Lego that I could use to make a keyhole garden. So if you look at the picture on the left-hand side, it's a very, very basic one, very sort of easy to understand the concept, but it's a circle. And in fact, the circle by design is 6 foot diameter, 3 feet high, with a cutout. And you'll see the cutout there on the the left-hand side picture. It's made of lumber. And you're supposed to step into that spot so you have easy access to a little mesh bin that's in the center. And that is where you put your compost. On the right-hand side, you'll see two other keyhole gardens made of stack stone. One of them might not be 3 feet high, but you do see the little cutout once again. And you see all these beautiful, lush vegetables that are really benefiting from this small space. Because as you can guess, as a lot of you here are master gardeners, that compost is making the soil super, super rich. Why is keyhole gardening important? So composting is a big deal, especially amongst master gardeners. I teach composting to fifth graders at Durham, and it's like their minds are blown. They're like, you can just take basic items, food items, and put them back in the earth, and it makes the earth better? Yes. Keyhole gardening is also very cost effective. So if you don't have you don't have much of a budget, but you want to garden, you can be in a very sort of small space, spending very little money, and you can be gardening pretty quickly, growing vegetables pretty quickly. Another key thing about keyhole gardens too is that physically challenged people have easy access to these. And I'm going to speak to the history of keyhole gardening and how that affects that group of people. And I'll talk about that soon. But it is labor-saving technology as well, too. So my favorite thing to do when I was weeding the keyhole gardens was just to sit on the edge and lean in. And pretty much from anywhere on a keyhole garden, you can lean in and reach very, very easily. As you probably know, a raised bed will increase moisture retention. And I haven't put it on the slide here, but it's also has good drainage. You have enriched soil, and I like to brag that it's the best soil in South Lake. And I have experienced year-round vegetable production. So here's some more images. Now, these ones aren't as pretty, these keyhole gardens. You can see on the left-hand side, there's sort of a mesh contraption that someone's put a double-layered wall of mesh and filled it with stones. And then in the little circular area, you can see that there's soil, and then you can see the column, which is where the compost goes. And that definitely works. It's just not attractive, but it's definitely functional. On the right-hand side, you're seeing a keyhole garden that was created in Africa, which is the origin of keyhole gardens. And like I said, I'll talk to you about the history of them very shortly in the next slide or two. But in this picture, you can see that there's all of these uneven rocks. These are rocks that were gathered in the vicinity, and that there is a cylinder in the center that is made of sticks. And it just has a little bit of bag or canvas around it, and that is the compost center. And you can see that person is standing in the little cutout area, very easily reaching into the compost. So I'm dying to tell you about the history of keyhole gardens, and I'm sure you're dying to hear about it. And when I tell my students, I've got a history lesson for you, they groan, but it's actually very, very cool. So this was a very intentional project that was a necessity back in the 80s when, as you can all recall, that there was a massive AIDS epidemic. So there was a consortium that came out, and they were all about food security and trying to help people who were in dire need to grow their own food. Now, at the same time that AIDS was running rampant, there was massive drought, and as a result, there was a massive food shortage. And when you have that coupled with people who are dying of AIDS, struggling with AIDS, very, very weak from AIDS, they really didn't have the energy to grow their own food and thus survive. So this solution of creating this keyhole garden, and it was created by a British horticulturalist who basically said, I'm going to create this design, and it can be made by readily accessible materials in a small African village. So the circle that you saw I'm just going to go back a slide there. So the circular makeup of the Keyhole Garden on the right-hand side picture, that's just rocks that came from that little village. And the soil that's in there, when you first start by putting soil in there, it's not very nutrient rich. But a compost center, which is right in the center there with the 4 sticks, that's just readily available materials from just wherever they could find sticks. And it was all close by. And the basic design, once put together like that, when putting the sort of, I guess, not very good soil in, but after about 6 or 7 weeks, they found that the soil was getting really, really good. People were putting compost in the center, and that would be things like melon rinds, leftover soup, tea, eggs, eggshells, anything left over that couldn't be consumed as food, but was compostable, created this beautiful soil. And once these Keyhole gardens got going, they could feed a family of 4 for a month. So they're pretty significant. And unfortunately and sadly, Lesotho, which is a landlocked country within South Africa, still has the highest rate of AIDS. But there are Keyhole gardens everywhere, and people are still trying to help people with their farming there. But it was a very successful endeavor. And as a result, the Keyhole gardening practice is being used widely throughout the world. You just research it, go on Google, look on Pinterest, just Google it. You'll see that people are building Keyhole gardens left, right, and center because they're just a very successful way of gardening. So I'm going to give you another visual here. This is more of a 3D. So imagine this is a Keyhole garden where we've sliced it in the middle, or sort of down the middle. So the very bottom of it is just the ground. And you can see that there's compost that's being put in the middle. And as that compost is disintegrating, which happens very quickly here in Texas because of our heat, all of the good nutrients, nitrogen, carbon, compost tea, any little critters and worms that have started growing in there are all seeping out into the rest of the Keyhole garden. So this is a 6-foot diameter, 3-foot high space where this soil is just getting all sorts of great nutrients. And it's just beautiful soil. But that compost bin in the center is constantly evolving. It is just decomposing all the time. At Durham, I would take compost. I'd go to Tom Thumb or Kroger, and they just give me piles of lettuce and all sorts of vegetables that were expired. And I would just dump that in, and it would go right to the top of the compost bin. And within a week, it was halfway down again. And so where was all that compost going? Where was all that good stuff going? It was seeping into the soil. And what I have found is that the vegetables that I'm able to grow in this Keyhole garden are spectacular. They're usually about twice the size of what you can grow in a regular garden bed. This is, oh, sorry, I'm going to pause for 1 second. I'm going to show you a video. So this is someone named Deb Tolman, and she is a professor down in Austin, and she teaches people how to build Keyhole gardens. So enjoy.
Cardboard. Stacks and stacks of cardboard. Debbie Tolman can't get enough of it. She's seen what these crushed boxes can do. They unlock the power of something called a Keyhole garden, and it's her mission to share it with the world.
It is called a Keyhole garden because there is a pie-shaped wedge cut out of one end, which gives you access to a center spot for kitchen scraps. Why kitchen scraps? Well, they're 95% water, and the Keyhole gardens are extremely efficient at holding water. Now, what I bring to the table on the Keyhole gardens is how to fill them. So here's what happens. We're gonna grab cardboard and we're gonna line it around the inside of the Keyhole garden.
Welcome to one of Dr. Deb's Keyhole Garden classes. Today, men, women, and children will learn about this revolutionary new trend in sustainable gardening, where cardboard is your soil and phone books your fertilizer.
Here's more leafy stuff. Keyhole gardening is an art and a science. You will always get beautiful soil and good-looking plants because they're exposed to compost and a good balance of microbiology. Let's go with magazines. Yeah. Chop them in there. Now remember, we don't want it too thick. So spread it out. You never have to till this. You should never have weeds. You should never have any insect problems. And oh, by the way, you don't have to bend over. How sweet is that?
Go around that side, sir. Thank you.
Deb will tell you that keyhole gardens use less water, grow faster, and need very little maintenance. Now, she didn't invent this miracle system. Some folks in England did that. But she has perfected her particular recipe. Having a PhD in environmental sciences and several master's degrees certainly helped, but nothing beats real-world experimentation.
Give yourselves a hand. This looks great. Yes. Yeah, it actually is really great.
Her homestead in Clifton, Texas, has become a living laboratory dedicated to new ideas.
So these are the original keyhole gardens. So you start with a dumpster's worth of flattened cardboard. A dumpster's worth. That's a lot
Cardboard?
Cardboard. It's carbon. And then that becomes your beginning volume. So you need a 3-to-1 ratio. Browns to greens, cardboard to manure, or what other greens you have. And that makes compost within 4 weeks if you do it right.
So I've made compost, and now I essentially have soil.
And you have better than soil. You have something that will hold moisture 10 times better than regular soil. You have something with carbon in it. You have a setup for the best microbiological soup in the world.
Are these edible? According to Deb, anything can be grown in a keyhole garden, even trees. She currently has several around her property, growing everything from greens to berries to citrus. Just like a house needs a solid foundation, plants need the right soil to flourish.
Healthy soil is so important. And soil with moisture in it is important. And you only get that moisture by having a compost setup because it holds 10 times more moisture than the existing landscape. For the backyard gardener, this is a great way because this contains the compost in one location.
Is this part of that whole circle of life thing? You know, I mean, come on.
That's good, Bob.
Is
High
it?
five.
All right.
There you go. That's good.
The Texas weather is ripe for a self-sustaining system like keyhole gardens. But Deb Tolman wants to teach more than just how to make one. Her lessons go below the surface because healthy soil means much more than healthy plants. It's the groundwork for a healthy environment for all of us.
The health of the soil predetermines a lot of things. It predetermines how water moves. It predetermines how healthy your plants are, which then determines whether or not you have insects that are attracted to the area, which then determines how much food you get or how much wildlife you get. All that diversity is important, and it all starts at the soil. Healthy soil begets healthy plants, which then begets healthy animals, which then beget healthy people. So it's all very connected. It is totally very connected.
So there you go. I mean, just a fantastic video. Deb Tolman I think has about 40 keyhole gardens on her property. And you could see in the video, she'd made them out of all sorts of different things. Another thing that you probably observed was that she was using a lot of cardboard, which is a great ingredient for soil. And if you have a lot of cardboard handy and you can't afford to buy soil, you can just make your soil from scratch. And so just remember, make sure that you're watering it and you're throwing in other elements like leaves and things like that, and some greens. But yeah, that's what she teaches. And she does have a book out on Amazon that I think it's just Keyhole Gardening by Deb Tolman. I had the picture up here. I can get the information to you guys afterwards, but it's pretty simple. I'm going to show you now some other steps. I love to sort of look at this visually from a ton of different ways, so that you can understand sort of how they're made. But these were my step-by-step instructions when I built these over at the school. And so you just simply start with a circle. And I started mine on sort of a sandy bed. I put some sand down just so I could level stones a little bit better. And people have asked me, can you start one on cement instead of just on the ground? And I think you can. You'll still get the drainage, but I think if you have it on the soil, it's a bit better because you get a lot more sort of seepage into the ground as well, instead of on cement. But we just outlined with stones, and we made a basket out of wire. But you can see it's kind of like a little basket box there. I've also heard that, you can take a lot of little sticks and you can line them up in a row and kind of wind them up with string and make a cylinder with sticks that way too. You can see here now that scraps are being put on the bottom and it's getting built. And in the lower left there, you can see that they're starting to layer. So if you're building it where you're building the wall at the same time as building the soil, you can kind of do a little bit of both. I built my wall all the way up to the top, the 3 feet, and then I started filling it with soil. But you can see here in the top left that there's some soil added on top, and it's actually mounded. And it really shouldn't be flat because soil is constantly decomposing. Soil is a living organic thing that microorganisms are eating in there. Things are breaking down. The heat from the environment is breaking it all down. And so starting with a really nice big mound of the soil on the top is really essential. My Durham keyhole gardens, I probably fill twice a year. Not fill, but I mound them back up and I add additional soil and elements to them. Maintenance is pretty simple. So you might ask yourself, well, how often do I have to water? Because the watering is really done in the compost center, in the compost bin in the middle. And then from there, that helps break down the compost, and then the compost tea is made and things are breaking up into the soil around it. But over at the school, I actually had a water spigot a little sprinkler head put in the center of each one. And the water was put on about twice a week for about 10 minutes. So if you don't have that, you really are going to be watering by hand or just have a hose somewhere nearby. And so the watering part, that's it, just a couple of times a week. The soil, like I said, you just need to pile it up a little bit every once in a while because it decomposes. And the basket, you just keep filling with the type of scraps that you would be putting in your own compost bins. So if you have a lot of eggshells, if you had a lot of coffee grounds, I wouldn't put anything in there that would attract animals. So obviously you don't put meat or bones in the basket. I found that even though it's very hot in Texas, citrus takes a lot longer to decompose. And if you have this in your own backyard and you have pets, you wouldn't put things like onions and avocado that are toxic to dogs. Garden construction, if you built it out of something that's not rocks and stones, occasionally you might need to just kind of fortify yours. But there's, and I'll show you some pictures too of some other ideas of how keyhole gardens are constructed, and some of them are a lot more durable than others. So planting in your keyhole garden, you're probably asking yourself, well, hey, I'm really ready to get going on building this thing because I'm so excited about Shan's presentation. But the planting that you can do in a keyhole garden is really quite varied. And you can just sort of plant things varied throughout the garden. You might want to mark what you've planted so you know what you've got. I accidentally plant some things by dumping things like melon seeds in my keyhole compost, and I'll end up growing things in the center as well too, which is kind of fun. But I've had tremendous success with things like kale, Swiss chard, onions, beets, radishes, carrots, not so much. Potatoes, yes, potatoes were huge, and we grew them in there. We've grown eggplant, as well as various squash and pumpkin as well too. And they're just, plants, vegetables are just so happy in there because the soil it's 3 feet deep. So there's a lot of room for root growth, and there's a lot of space for it to kind of spill over the edge as well too. Here's some pictures and this is just from Pinterest. And I told you I like to build things, and some of these are very designery. Like you can see one that's the second down from the top left, and it's made of wine bottles. You'll still get great drainage there. I don't know where the cutout area is. It must be in the back of the picture, but perfectly usable keyhole garden. And someone cemented one there, and I think that's probably with bottles as well too, because it's got those glass polka dots. There's one there, it's the bottom right, and it's made of sort of interlocking logs. That one probably isn't going to be as durable because the wood's going to break down faster than cement. On the left-hand side, second up from the bottom, there's a metal tub that is a keyhole garden. And I'm going to advise to you that it's probably not the best material. It's durable, but that metal bin in Texas is going to get really, really hot, and it's going to heat up your soil. Plus, if you're leaning up against it, it's going to be uncomfortable on your legs. I like the keyhole garden on the bottom left because it's got some metal wires or posts on it, and therefore you can have climbing vegetables in there. I did do beans at one point, and I'm not sure that would be my favorite vegetable to grow. They had support of some wires and trellises, but they got really out of control, and we ended up getting some wasps in there. But I'm sure your imagination is going wild right now with the possibilities of what you can use to build a keyhole garden. And I think I already went over this. These are the things that I have grown. And I think carrots was one that didn't work well. Anything that needs like the corn, if you had to have that like on a trellis, that corn's kind of hard to grow. But I've grown pretty much, tomatoes. Oh my gosh. I had one tomato plant and it took over one year, the entire keyhole garden. I had the two of them. It took over one of them. And I ended up taking 10 pounds of tomatoes over to the food bank because school was out, and I had all these tomatoes, and they were huge and red. Very happy tomatoes. Here is a picture or some pictures of the project that I was describing back in 2018. So we started with this area that was about 200 square feet, and it was just off to the side of the school garden that's already there. So I had plenty of space. The school said, sure, yep, go ahead and just put it there. And we ended up putting some landscape fabric down to kind of combat the Bermuda grass that would be growing up through it. And the landscape fabric kind of disintegrated after about a year, but that was fine because we had other things on it as well. You can see on the right-hand side that we had a layer of sand, and this was play sand, which helped us establish a 6-foot diameter circle, get it kind of level. If you're going to be using these stack stones, I would highly advise that first row that you do is very, very level. And if you get that nice and level, the rest of the layers that you put around with those stack stones, super duper easy. So that was the layout that we had going. And then you can see there on the left-hand side that we started going upwards with our stack stones, and we used cinder blocks for the cutout area. And it was just they're very sturdy, and you could make an entire keyhole garden out of cinder blocks as well too, but they're very straight. And so you'd have lots of sort of pointy edges, whereas the retaining wall blocks were definitely more curved. And so you can see there in the middle that we also had the compost bin, which was made out of mesh. All of this came from Home Depot, and YMSL paid for it all, but we estimated that each keyhole setup was probably about $120 in materials if you wanted to price it out. So we had that mesh cylinder there, and I just held it together with zip ties. You might even be able to see a little rod there with a white tip on it. That was our irrigation that the school kind of set up for us. And so that was regular watering that we still get. And then we started filling, and we put cardboard in there occasionally, but YMSL was very generous and had supplied us with a lot of landscape mix. So they were putting that in there. And on the right-hand side, you can see the finished product. And these were 3 feet high and 6 feet in diameter. And if I haven't mentioned it, I know I mentioned that you can sit on the edge of them and it's easy access, but the 6 feet diameter was very intentional because a human arm is about 2 feet and a bit. And so standing anywhere around the edge of this circle, you would be able to get access to the compost bin in the center by just putting your hands out. So you wouldn't have to go into the little keyhole cutout. And then the 3 feet was ergonomic, and it's really the height of a nice chair. So you can just sit down, reach in, and if you were suffering from AIDS, you're malnourished, you wouldn't have to use a lot of energy to garden in this little space. So we've replicated that, and we used crushed granite as well too around the outside, and had some stepping stones because I was using this space to teach the 5th graders at the school all about keyhole gardening. So the one thing that we discovered after the fact was that this whole space was on a slight decline. So it was on a little bit of a hill, and we didn't realize this, but there were no eaves on the school. So when we would get that frog strangling rain that we get, the water was gushing off of the roof of the school and not coursing, but it was definitely making its way down to the keyhole garden area. So after about a year, the crushed granite had suffered from a lot of erosion. So we ended up replacing it with river rock a year later, and that really helped with the erosion. So here's some pictures of the keyhole gardens in action. And this was like probably about a year later, because you can see that I've got the river rock here. And I had just filled up the soil, and this was soil that we made ourselves in the school garden because the school garden has big compost bins, and there's a lot of debris that gets cut down at the school. And it's just very easy to make your own soil. So that was a really exciting part of this process as well too. But you can see that that bin, it's very easy to fill it with all sorts of kitchen scraps. And we encourage the students to put, their lunch scraps as well too, like banana peels and carrot sticks. And what you're seeing all in the vicinity there is spinach. And Dina and I just tossed some seeds in there, and we didn't do much else. You just kind of forget about it. And within about 3 weeks, we had all of this spinach. It's a good thing we like spinach. This is a comparison side by side. The one on the left is my own garden. And these are tomato plants that I grow in my greenhouse. I grow them from seed, and I get super excited about growing tomatoes. So if you're a friend of mine, you usually get a free tomato plant right about March. But these are called Gardener's Delight, and they're pull tomatoes. So they love to vine. And I was very proud of them, and they're growing on things, and they're beautiful and green. But compared to the exact same plants that came from my little seeds that I propagated, looking on the right-hand side, here they are in the keyhole garden. And you can see how lush they are and how dark green the leaves are. And this was the plant that produced 10 extra pounds of tomatoes that I had to donate to the food bank. And you could see that the tomatoes were, I'm going to say, 50% bigger. So it was an experiment that I really didn't intend to do, but it was pretty cool. And it proved that keyhole gardens are very effective. Going back to the left-hand picture, based on what we saw with the keyhole gardens, I took this area in my own garden and I went up about another foot and raised my bed there. And I put compost in there. And so the tomatoes I have this year are still producing, and it's October. And so raised bed gardening. Okay. So I am pretty much at the end of this presentation. And I can speak to this last picture though, too. And this was accidental keyhole gardening because I put cantaloupe, it's either cantaloupe or squash, in the compost bin itself and forgot about it. And it had a lot of seeds in it. So it started growing and it just took over. And I think we ended up getting like 14 cantaloupe just from, or they're melon, they were honeydew melon maybe, in that keyhole garden. And so you can see that it is just a wonderful way to small space garden, to have a garden that's very easily ergonomic, very easy to access, very easy to build. And I've had a lot of people come and tell me that based on what they saw here at the school, that they've gone and built their own keyhole gardens. We even had a student come and give me a jar of jalapeno jelly because their parents grew jalapenos in the keyhole garden that we talked about in class. And so it's very rewarding. So if you have a small space, if you have some energy and you have some materials, you can build your own. And that is, and you can visit, I'm going to say that you could visit Durham. I have to warn you guys that no one is tending to the garden right now. So it has become very overgrown. The keyhole gardens are still there. So you could go and look at them in South Lake if you want to get sort of a sense of what they look like in real life. But I also urge you to go out on the internet and look and see. There are thousands of ideas and pictures and plans. And if you have any questions about keyhole gardens, need any help with some ideas or just answering questions, you can reach me on the email that's on that slide. So thank you for your time. And I've allowed some time in this presentation for questions. So I'd hand that over to our moderator if there are any questions.
It'll help if I unmute. There's one person that says my keyhole garden was invaded this summer by native passion vine. Any suggestions about removal?
Oh boy. Well, the great thing about a keyhole garden, it is constantly evolving. So you're going to have crops that you're rotating and things that might be ending their production and starting new. So I would say just start digging it out as much as you possibly can and maybe looking for the source of where the passion vine came from. Because if you didn't want it there, chances are you didn't plant it. So you may want to just make sure that your neighbors don't have a lot of it or you have it invading other spaces. Because it is a small space. It's like a hotel. There's only so many rooms. There's only so much space. So Deb Tolman in her video said that you don't get weeds, but you sometimes do. And I know that those, for us at the school, the weeds came because we left open space. So maybe here's the way to approach it. Don't leave any empty space for the weeds to take over. Plan out your garden, take each little area and put something very intentional in there so that the weeds don't have an empty room to get into.
Okay, here's a question. Martha has a question. In the video, did they just use cardboard or did they also add soil?
In the video, you saw a lot of the cardboard used, but they did put soil in there as well too. So if you were approaching this and you had an empty keyhole garden that you had built, I would probably try and use as much of your much cardboard as you possibly could get your hands on. Try not to use things that have a lot of ink on them, but you could definitely put soil in. And you can even put sort of substandard soil because it's going to get pretty nutrient rich pretty quickly.
Okay. Janet wants to know, are there any problems with ants in the Keyhole garden?
Ants are everywhere in Texas, so you are going to see ants. And so if you're sitting yourself down on the edge of the Keyhole garden, I always make sure that there's no ants around. But if I have to put ant bait down, I put it around the outside because remember, we're growing things that people are going to eat. So if you find that you are completely overrun by ants, don't put anything to kill the ants that is dangerous for vegetables and would affect you eating the vegetables and having that in it. Hot water, boiling water will knock out ants if they're next to your vegetables. If you have other organic ways of getting rid of ants that don't harm your vegetables, you can go ahead and do that.
You could use like orange oil then, an orange oil drench.
If you use that on vegetables, I typically don't, but it is a small space. You'll be very aware of the ants. And I really don't feel like we get completely overrun by ants. I feel like we're just constantly working on the Keyhole garden. So you're constantly digging things out, moving things, planting things. I find, in my experience at least, that anthills show up in areas where you might not be paying attention or you might not be taking care of your garden. They sneak up on you. So I'm going to say confidently, I haven't had a huge ant problem in my Keyhole gardens.
Okay. How would a Keyhole garden be different from a rectangular garden with a compost cylinder in the middle?
Well, in a rectangular garden, you wouldn't be able to access from a pointy corner, for example. So I think that might be the only difference. It's just the accessibility of it. So the pure design of the Keyhole garden is meant to be as ergonomic as possible. So it's meant to be accessible from every single side. And a circle, as you know, is nice and smooth all the way around. And I also think that if the very traditional intentional Keyhole garden, the original design, it'd probably be a lot easier to build something that's circular versus angular. But you could definitely do a Keyhole garden in a rectangle.
Okay, I know Sharon has her hand up for a question. You can unmute Sharon and ask Shan your question. Can you click on the little microphone and unmute?
Oh, she almost had it.
There you go.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I can.
Have you tried using coffee grounds? Starbucks and places like that will give you their used coffee grounds. They work fabulous for fire ants. I don't think they kill them, but they go find another zip code.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so I do use coffee grounds because I drink a lot of coffee. Maybe that's why I don't have ants. But that's a very interesting share because yeah,
sometimes they will give you, I'll go in. They used to put them in nice little bags that talked about how good they were for compost and things. But now once in a while you walk in and the guy gives you a 35-pound bag he puts in the back of your car. Okay, that's a lot of coffee grounds.
Well, you won't have ants.
But even if you have fire ants, if you put it on the pile and that you go out in an hour or so, they have all left.
Oh,
but of course you don't want too many in your compost pile if you have worms and things, I don't think. You just want enough to get rid of them.
I find that, so what we find is a really nice mix is kind of 3 parts brown and 2 parts green, and the compost, like food scraps and all of that, including coffee grounds and the eggshells, I think balanced out with the leaves and things that we put in there. We definitely get the worms. So I guess ours is good, but I would imagine, yes, I wouldn't put in massive amounts of coffee grounds, but I'm going to try that. I've
composted since I grew up. We composted, But I didn't know about the coffee grounds until one year. We had a large lot and 100 oak trees, and I had started shredding them, and had this huge stack like 3 feet high, about 20 feet long. I came to turn it in the spring, and it was boiling with fire ants, and I was just sick. I didn't know what I was going to do. I went online, and they said, go get coffee grounds.
Yeah, I think that's a great share. I really appreciate that.
So that's been my process for 30 years. I love this, by the way. I moved to a small property, and I don't have room for a keyhole, but I never did that. But I wish I would have when I had the space to do so.
Well, if you have an even smaller space, I've told people that you don't need to build the keyhole garden. You could just put the little mesh basket in your raised bed somewhere and just have it right there. And so it's kind of a mini keyhole garden.
I have one of those little 30-inch by 30-inch or 36 by 36 green wire composts.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you can lift the top off, and that's been doing a good job for me for the last 5-6 years.
Oh, it's great.
You have to excuse me. My allergies are killing me, and my voice is shot.
Well, I still appreciate the feedback on the coffee grounds. That's a good takeaway.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions?
Any more questions? I guess you just covered it all. You did a great job.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for your time. I hope that some of you are going to go out and build one of these, or start planning some kind of space where you can do your keyhole gardens.